Italia. Mereka adalah delegasi-delegasi yang mewakili dari negara-negara berbeda di Y20 tahun ini. Dan mungkin bagi kalian yang tidak tahu, Y20 itu adalah salah satu engagement group dari G20, jadi pertemuan KTT, dan juga tentunya kita di IYD, Indonesian Youth Diplomacy, sebenarnya awalnya itu didirikan untuk menggabungkan semua alumni-alumni istilahnya dari delegasi-delegasi dari Y8 sampai ke Y20, dan kali ini kita mau berbincang dengan para delegasi ini yang luar biasa yang menjadi perwakilan untuk tahun ini. Bagi yang tidak tahu, saya adalah ketua delegasi untuk Indonesia di Y20 tahun lalu di Saudi Arabia. Dan saya akan jadi moderator atau host untuk malam hari ini. Untuk yang mungkin akan mengikuti, kita akan melakukan perbincangan karena ini sekali lagi adalah internasional. Kita akan lakukan dalam bahasa Inggris. And on that note, so welcome for everyone who might be tuning in from wherever you are around the world. You might be tuning in at 5 o'clock in the morning, whereas those of us who are tuning in from the other side of the world, like Indonesia, we are here 7 o'clock in the evening, and so, except for Dea. Dea's tuning in at 8 o'clock because Indonesia has 3 time zones. For those of you who don't know, hey, trivia. So we have an exciting discussion tonight, Indonesian time tonight, or this morning, wherever you are. And we have 9 delegates joining us this evening, representing the different countries that are there at the Y20. For those of you who do not know, Y20 is one of the engagement groups of the G20. And basically we are all, I say we because I was a delegate last year. I was the head delegate for Indonesia in Y20 2020 Saudi Arabia. And it is absolutely my pleasure to host the delegates this year. I was basically lobbied by the Indonesian delegates to do this, but it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure and an honor to be able to discuss behind the scenes. So we were discussing whether or not we were going to do like the title of this would be like spill the tea, because it seems there's a lot of things that might have been going on behind the scenes, a lot more than it was last year. Although I can share you a little bit about last year. There was drama there too, you know. So see, people think diplomacy is something boring, right? It's like, oh, it's just like meeting and sitting down. No. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And so again, for those of you as well joining us around the world, IYD, or Indonesian Youth Diplomacy, basically started by the alums, by those who were delegates before. And in Indonesia, we have a tradition of basically passing the torch. We have a selection process every year. And so past delegates are all within IYD, and basically it's going to be our pleasure as well to host the next one. Indonesia will become the presidency for G20 and of course Y20 next year. And we want to get as much insight and basically key takeaways from all the delegates this year and the years before. So this is a great chance as a post summit, because summit for Y20 this year was done. And we want to know more from everyone who is here. So I'll start with brief introduction. We have our 3 delegates here from Indonesia. All of them are represented here. We have Ibu Puteri Komarudin, who is the head delegate for Indonesia this year. She is a member of parliament. And she might not look it, but she basically deals with all the finance stuff. See, I'm more humanitarian, so anything to do with like budgeting and like numbers, I don't go that way, but she does. So very important, because anything, no matter what we're fighting for, cannot be done without the support of budget. Is that not correct, Putri?
Correct, Mbak Sarah. Hi, everyone.
Great, thank you so much for joining us. And we also have Ibu Caroline Dea Tasirin, goes by Dea, and yes, it's a bit strange because in Indonesia you don't necessarily call all the lecturers professor, but I remember from my time studying in University of Virginia that you do call anybody who's teaching at the university level professor. So Professor Dea, who basically lectures on forestry program at the Samratulangi University, and basically is a team leader for wildlife conservation societies for the wildlife crime unit. Oh, you don't want to mess with her, in North Sulawesi in Indonesia. And she also runs Sulut Semangat, another foundation. So thanks so much for joining us, Dea, or Professor Dea.
Oh boy, thanks for having me, Mbak Sarah. Hi, everyone.
And last but not least, the most handsome out of the three delegates from Indonesia, we have Angelo Wijaya. Well, he's the only guy. So we have Angelo, who is basically a consultant at the World Bank Group, where he assists the IFC's operations in East Asia and Pacific and South Asia regions. So welcome aboard, Angelo.
Hi, Mbak Sarah.
Perfect. All right. And aside from those delegates, they've also contacted their fellow delegates out of, with extreme screening. I don't know what filter they used, but basically they got their fellow delegates here with us I will say today, because I need to stop saying this evening, because obviously you're all tuning in from different areas of the world. I'll start with Puteri's priority area. So for those of you who don't know, each year, basically the Y20 has priority areas, and this year they have three. The first one is inclusion and equal opportunity. And we have Irem joining us from Turkey. It should be middle of the day. Is that not correct, Irem?
It's 3 p.m. here.
3 p.m. Okay, so not so much middle of the day, but you're wide awake. You're wide awake.
That's right.
Yeah, and Irem you have a very interesting background, by the way, but currently she works in the Association for Solidarity with Asylum Seekers and Migrants in Ankara as a project development officer, where she continues to work for the refugee communities. Very, very interesting and important work. And she is a delegate for Turkey. Thank you so much for joining us, Irem.
Thank you for inviting.
Great. And next, we also have in that track, Amani Al-Hiyami from Saudi Arabia. And she's basically the Saudi's head delegate this year. Previously worked at the UN and now currently working at, Amani, you're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong. Is it NEOM or NEOM? Yeah. In strategic partnerships. NEOM. Okay, great. Yeah. Sometimes they don't like to make it all together. Thanks so much for joining us, Amani. Fantastic.
Yes, hello everyone, and hi from the futuristic city of NEOM. I'm very excited to be here.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. And we're moving to the next track, which is sustainability, climate, and energy, which is basically what Dea was representing Indonesia for. And we have Jamilah. Jamilah Bahay is the delegate for Canada, and she is a master candidate in international affairs, trade, and international finance. Okay, that should be in line with Puteri, actually. But she's also an active board member of the Junior Diplomat Initiative Switzerland, where she engages on the front lines of diplomacy and young person. So Jamilah, thank you so much for joining us. Are you all the way in Canada right now?
You know what? It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me in India. Thank you so much for reaching out. I'm not all the way in Canada. I'm actually in Switzerland because I'm studying here. So the timing is good. It's a good time.
Oh, it is a good time. I was worried. I was like, Canada, I'm like, which part of Canada?
It would have been west. It would have been bad if I was there, but
it would have been like 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning. Okay, well, I'm glad you're in Switzerland. So which part of Switzerland, by the way? Because I used to live in Geneva.
Oh, I'm in Geneva. I'm studying at I'm in Geneva.
Sorry, I'm a working mom, so this one wanted to say hi. That's my firstborn. All right. This is work from home, see. All right, Jamilah, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Switzerland. And now we're going to go to Emiliano Reyes Galindo from Mexico. Okay, so are you in Mexico right now, Emiliano?
Hola a todos, how are you? Yes, I'm in Mexico City.
Okay, what time?
It's right now 7 a.m., so I'm probably one who's earliest.
I think so too, but not so bad. I mean, it's not like 5 o'clock in the morning. So seven's okay. All right.
It's
so
manageable.
It's manageable, right? Okay. So Emiliano, he is basically an ambassador for the climate and on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Relations and the Climate Reality Project, Latin America. Hello, fellow Climate Reality Project leader. I'm also, and currently an advisor in international cooperation for sustainable development in a project on the convergence of energy and climate change policy in Mexico. Thanks so much for joining us, Emiliano.
Thanks for inviting me.
And now we go to the next one, which is innovation, digitalization, and future of work, which is quite intimidating if you put it all together like that, which is Angelo's stream and track. And we have Gaia Reyes from the UK delegation, but you are not in the UK right now. You are in New York, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. It should be 8 o'clock in the morning.
Exactly.
I got it right. Okay. Time zones. Hey, okay. Well, she is a consultant at UN Women, the United Nations entity for gender equality. Love it. Thank you so much for joining us, Gaia.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And now, hold on a second. I think Dustin might not be here with us yet, but he will be joining us in just a few moments. And just to get everyone's introductions, first of all, of course, Dustin Liu is the delegate for the US, served as the 9th UNA USA Youth Observer to the United Nations. He just graduated from Harvard University with a postgraduate degree in education. So we have a wide range of delegates here with us. And again, it is an absolute pleasure to have all of you here. Please excuse this one right here, okay? But but hey, including for working moms. Okay, so so here we go. I want to get started with, first of all, I want to know, let's get to it. What, if you can just, your expectations. All right, so we have a limited time, so I'm just going to get straight to what were your expectations when you were all signing up to be delegates? Because I know I've got my own, expectations at that time. So what were your expectations and were they met? Were you disappointed in some ways, or were you actually like highly impressed? So I want to give each and every single one of you a chance, perhaps like 2 minutes each. We'll start first with Puteri's track, right? Puteri, you can start off first of all with you. So we'll go with the inclusion and equal opportunity. So Puteri, what were your expectations? 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Sarah. Well, I think in general, we really expected the negotiation to be difficult and grueling, and that reaching an agreement will be challenging. And I'm sure that all the delegates here believe in their proposals and took it with high regard to be included in the communique. And each of our proposals has been composed with a lot of care, a lot of time was invested, and is supported with research to truly reflect what the youth and our own country wanted to achieve. And however, looking back, I think despite the different priorities, I can see that the delegates do have collective interests that need to be fought together as a community. And with this understanding, similar points and thoughts were organized better and consolidated through the final communique. And here we are in the mini reunion looking happy more than ever. So yeah, that's from me, Mbak Sarah.
Fantastic. And you know what? She and I, we both can talk. okay? Because as members of parliament, we are paid to parler, right? So I'm surprised she managed to get that in within 2 minutes. So well done.
I know, right?
Madam Representative, well done, okay? So here we go. I'll go straight next to Irem. Irem, how was your expectation? I mean, was it met? How was your experience?
Actually, I will say something very similar to Putri. That I was expecting that there would be a harsh diplomacy game, that there would be a lot of conflict. I thought the countries that, let's say, traditionally are far from Turkey would have a stronger stance towards me. But actually, that wasn't the case. I faced with a very consensus-based process for my experience. As Putri said as well, actually, all the ideas were included somehow, and we tried to make it like priorities of the country. There was a lot of common things, but let's say keeping what is the priority for each country, actually we let the delegate to stand for that, and we included all the ideas into the communique. So for me, it was much more positive than what I expected. So over to you, not to keep it longer.
No, but fantastic. I'm hearing all positive so far. Angelo, you better bring in the heat later, huh? All right. Next, from Irem, we have Amani. You're also in that track. How was it? I mean, are you gonna repeat what they said? Was it all positive? Flowers and butterflies?
I mean, when you want flowers and butterflies, there's always flowers and butterflies. I think for me, I came in expecting to meet wonderful people, which I 100% did. I completely agree with both Irem and Putri. I think it was really a process, right? There were times where I felt some countries might be very much against what some of the priority that I have placed for my country. But actually, we really worked very well together to make sure that we all agree and we get to a point where we do achieve an agreement across all of the different tracks. Not to say everything was super pink and rosy. There were times where it was difficult, but I think the positive outcomes of that though was that it really taught us to work better together, and taught us to be better throughout the process and find solution within areas where it was quite difficult or challenging. So yeah, definitely 100%. It was a great process.
Well, I'm glad to hear at least there was a little bit of that process being done, with the negotiation, and there were some points that were perhaps contentious or, that needed a little bit more time to discuss. Because if you had said, oh no, it was all perfect, nobody argued anything, it was all accepted, I would have been just completely jealous, because last year that wasn't how it went down. I mean, you can imagine even the chair had to step in because there were like Sherpas coming in and like intervening, and we were like, whoa, so okay, at least there's a little bit of discussions and negotiations being done. All right, so but at least overall, in that track, in the inclusion and equal opportunity, it seems that there was quite a great mood and collaboration, sense of unity to have a common purpose, right? Have a common ground to this, to talk on. So that's great. Thank you so much. We'll move on to the next track for now. Sustainability, climate, and energy. Dea, that was yours. So what was your expectation? I know you had a lot. I know you had like high expectations, being the professor that you are. How was it? Was it met? I mean, were you satisfied with how it went? Go ahead.
Well, as I said in like previous activities as well, this is my first sort of diplomatic experience, so I didn't have anything else to compare it to. Like, I didn't know, like, was this good? Was this bad? Like, it just was. And so that being said, I fully expected to be blown away by the other delegates. I absolutely was blown away. Just everyone.
You. I was getting nervous for your fellow delegates there for a second.
Oh, they were amazing. Like from all the other tracks as well, because we had all the bilaterals, right? And like
all of them were like had really cool backgrounds and experiences. So I was not disappointed there. I was blown away. Things that I was not expecting was like, I thought, as you said, it was going to be like really bone dry and just, boring, quote unquote. No, the process was actually more, I felt it had a lot of heart in the discussions that we had. Like we were really thinking about like what issues we had going on and like how we could best tackle it. There was just a lot of heart in the discussions, which I was not expecting. And well, summit-wise, like event-wise, I thought it was going to be a lot more negotiations. But the format that we had, it was like workshops, seminars, webinars, and so on. And then just a little, like maybe half or maybe less than half is the actual negotiation itself. Maybe if it had been in person, it would have been a lot more running around, like trying to meet up and discuss with people. But I mean, I guess since it's online, like that's what we got. So yeah, that's for me.
I completely agree with you. It's very different negotiating and talking online, which was, and I mean, at least you had time to kind of adjust to the online meetings and all of that. Last year, it was all completely new. So we it was like, what? Zoom, what? Google Meet, what? So it was, that's a completely new experience. But I'm sure, even with the online, somehow in a way, it makes it easier to get everybody to talk longer, because if you were talking just physically, it would just be during the summit or during the pre-summits, and in between it wouldn't be as many meetings as you would now. At least that's how my experience was last year. We were basically meeting almost every day for the last month while we were finalizing the communique. So we'll talk a little bit more about that so more people can understand what we all mean by negotiations, because I think not everybody understands that, there's actually a product that comes out of these meetings, that comes out of Y20. You're not just meeting and saying hi to each other and networking, but there's work to be done. So I'll go to Jamilah right now. Jamilah from Canada, you were in the same track as Dea. Were you getting nervous? She was gonna say she wasn't as blown away.
Yeah, I was like, well, I think I'm pretty special. No,
that's good for you.
These are really good points, I guess, from both of you. I mean, from the entire process, what I would say, I guess my expectations were when I started this from the very beginning, the beginning of last year was, I'll get a taste of diplomacy. I'll kind of see what it's like. It's almost like a year-long thing. Months of negotiations and then after advocacy. But then, you take this role and then you literally become an overnight diplomat, is what I found. We all became diplomats. It wasn't just us, trying things and getting a taste of what diplomacy is like we were diplomats. And that was a very steep learning curve on my end. I think on everyone's, I loved it. I very much enjoyed it. I learned, I loved it. And so I'm very grateful for the opportunity, but there was a lot to learn. It takes a lot of time and energy to be, it took a lot of time and energy, to prepare for your negotiations, at the end of the day, we want to come up with these groundbreaking ideas that will influence, or at least try to address global challenges. We're 3 people representing 20 G20 entities, trying to make a change. So there was also my expectation, which this was kind of difficult, was like this feeling of guilt. I don't know if anyone else felt that. I was like, I'm representing, for example, Canada and the G20 youth in terms of sustainability, climate change, and energy. And actually once during the summit, which no one knew, but I had a bottle of water next to me and I was so thirsty, and I was like, this is so hypocritical, talking about sustainability, have this bottle of water, people are gonna be so but really my expectations were beyond met. I learned a lot about negotiations. I know we'll talk more about that. but I learned how to connect with people, actually come up with solutions and ideas and hear everyone and try to make something out of that. But it was quite the learning curve, but very, very a valuable lesson.
I can completely imagine. I mean, it would probably be a little bit different for Putri and I, because I mean, I was a member of parliament from 2014 to 2019. And I mean, that was a steep learning curve for me, during those times, but going into Y20 wasn't so shocking, because I was already part of IPU and APPF and all of that. But I can completely respect all of you for coming in, because I can only imagine, without any training and without any exposure to being in the hot seat, right? I mean, you're basically in the hot seat. You're not just someone who's feeding data and information to the speakers. You're the speakers, right? You're the ones representing the youths of your country. And I completely respect and appreciate what you said, Jamilah, when you said that you weren't just practicing to be diplomats. You were diplomats. In Y20, you were the diplomats, and not so boring. I keep on wanting to go back to that, because I feel like, I mean, from just the random youth's perspective, sometimes thinking, diplomacy and all that, again, unless you like West Wing and all those Designated Survivor and all those political shows, it's not, they think it's like, oh my gosh, politics, diplomacy, not so fun, but it is fun. And I'm glad we get the chance to share that with the world. So Emiliano, on to you. What were your expectations, and did you have fun?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. And as Dan Jamilah said, we are in part of the climate change track. And as we know, climate change is a highly politicized topic. Like, there's no one country that agrees on what we have to do with climate. And that was something that I expected was going to be a problem, like how we're going to solve climate change. We as young people, we have many ideas, and we want to make recommendations to G20 leaders. And something that was very interesting to me is that there was an unanimous ambition for climate action. Of course, there were different degrees, and we can get into the details later, because there were differences on how developed and in developing countries should manage climate action. And there was a lot of, not confrontation, but a lot of negotiations and diplomatically telling, that is very interesting and good and yeah, important, but not for the global south. And we need to be pushing ambitious climate action. So that is the part of negotiation, but also for the whole process, I think that something that we all expected was to negotiate this in Milan and Bergamo, as we were supposed to do. And of course, because of the situation of COVID and everything, we couldn't do that. And virtuality, it's a challenge, but at least we managed to do it. And we managed to take out an ambitious communique with different policies that I hope that's an expectation also. I hope that the G20 leaders take these policies that we work so hard to negotiate and to bring them into the G20 communique in Rome later in October, And finally, just to conclude this intervention, I would say that my expectation was also to meet amazing people that had great ideas on how to solve climate action, and my expectation was more than that reach. I met amazing people that they're not only diplomats of the future, but they're my friends, and we're friends, and we continue to share memes and things. So that's one of the most amazing things that happened during the Y20. So yeah, I would say that, and maybe we can get later onto the details of the negotiation.
For sure. Emiliano, great intervention. That is such a Y20 language, by the way. What intervention? But that's part of the lingo for those of you who don't follow, right? So basically, each country is supposed to. See, this is Angelo's influence on me. Supposed to get time to give their interventions, and basically interventionists, giving opinions representing their stance. And so, Emiliano, great points on that. And I think your last point is so important. And I hope all the delegates get this. And sometimes it's not just a matter of like, oh yeah, we're meeting people from all over the world, and oh yeah, I learned this and I learned that. But I think a huge point from that is you get a lifetime of network, and some of them become friends because you find, oh my gosh, we have the same or like a common issue that we feel passionate about, and that's something that money can't buy, right? Honestly. So this is great. I'm getting good vibes. I'm getting good vibes from all of you. This is fantastic. I hope whoever basically watches this and all the youth that will be watching this will be inspired and say, you know what? It sounds fun. I might give diplomacy a try. So, hey, okay, we're winning here, but we'll move on to the next one because again, time is running out. It's like, oh my gosh, we want to get so much out. But here we go. Innovation, digitalization, and future of work. Angelo, on to you, my friend. Expectations, and were they met?
Mm-hmm. Right, Mazara. So I'll start with this. So you know that I studied international relations for my undergrad, right? I studied a lot of theories in international relations, and I thought Y20 was going to be something about that, right? Like I thought people and delegates will be divided along ideological lines. That was not the case. Young people, we bring we bring fresh voices, right? We bring fresh perspectives. And young people, we don't always, we're not always attached with the government, right? When the government says something, but then young people always, bring fresh voices. So I think that's not what happened at Y20. And another thing, I actually heard what happened during your year and how some sticking points, some topics become sticking points in your year. And there are some countries showing disagreements. I thought that's what's gonna happen this year as well, but that didn't happen. So I think my expectation did not met in a good way, right? I mean, we had better experience in terms of like young people bringing more voices and bringing fresh perspective. I'll stop there.
Thanks so much, Angelo. Yeah. So basically, the previous delegates were sharing like, oh my gosh, all the drama, but I'm glad that those expectations weren't met in a good way. So I want to ask Gaia. Gaia, do you agree with what Angelo said? I mean, was that what happened in your track and your priority area? Were you all just finding common ground and finding like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone in fighting this fight, right? Because sometimes being youth with a voice can be lonely at times when you believe in something so much, whereas our colleagues don't feel as strongly as we do about some of the things we do. And did you find that commonality with your fellow delegates in your track? How was it?
Yeah, no, it was honestly a fascinating experience. And it was interesting to find commonality not only within our track, but within different delegates from all across the world. So it's delegates who were interested in gender equality, and then you could see this passion and this energy for this specific cause, and that was honestly incredibly heartwarming to see. I think in terms of expectations, it's wonderful to be reunited with all of my delegates right now. I resonate so much with so much of what you've said. Especially what Dea said about heart. I think this is one of the incredible things about this process. Everyone brought such a passion to their voices, such a passion to their causes. People were advocating with like truly their heart and soul, staying up late at night in order to advocate for this, because it's such a unique and important opportunity. How often do young people's voices go to the top levels, go to the heads of state? Young people are hardly in positions of political representation. So this is just an incredible opportunity. And that's something that I think I didn't realize at the very beginning, but you saw this to the end, just how much passion people brought to their causes. And that was incredible to see. Obviously, there were many challenges. I think there were many shifts. It became virtual. People were dealing with different time zones, different priorities. All of these came into play in the process. So it was an exciting and insightful opportunity, I would say.
Great. And you know, Gaia, you know, on that note, because you were right there in the UN, right? I mean, that's another platform that I'm sure, you know, not that many people, not that many youths can have access to. And this is another platform then that you can, you know, lend a voice to and share. I'm sure Angelo, I'm sure Gaia shared her experiences as well, you know, from the UN with you guys and what they've been fighting for, so that can be aligned, right? Because alignment is sometimes, you know, is not met simply because everybody's kind of dispersed and divided. But I'm glad, you know, this again, Y20 is such a great platform to have everybody kind of be on the same boat and talk about the same issues, even though you all come from different backgrounds. And Dustin has already joined us. So Dustin from the US, I already gave your introduction before, so we're just gonna get straight to you. How was your expectation, and were they met, or were they blown out of the water in a good way? Or were you slightly disgruntled?
Well, good morning from Boston, Massachusetts. I'm really excited to be here. So good to see everyone's faces. Like I said, it kind of does feel like a family reunion in so many ways. My expectations, I'll just start by saying this is not just a hard group to follow, but an impossible group to follow. So I'm just going to build off of some of the points that I've already heard. It kind of feels like a social experiment, right? You throw young people, young leaders from across the world into a Zoom call. You know, not even a room, but a Zoom call, and ask them to think about ways in which they can align their options. So I had come in thinking that it would be absolute chaos. Like, honestly, hand on my heart, I was like, what is about to happen? This feels like a total social experiment. What actually happened was that it allowed me to really reassess the distance that I placed between myself and my peers halfway around the world. It was a really beautiful opportunity for us to invoke a sense of imagination and to hear in those brief introductions, the bilaterals, the trilaterals, having the chance to meet with delegations was such a magical experience to say, how much do we actually have in common? And at the root cause of it, even if we were approaching it from different policy standpoints, we were imagining a world where young people were thriving, where young people had opportunity, where young people were learning to earn. Especially on my track, what I found so special is that we understood the interconnected nature of our countries. And this idea of building back better as a global community was absolutely crucial. So my expectations were blown out of the water. I expected more chaos. What I actually found was a lot of dialogue and a lot of collaboration between the countries.
Fantastic, Dustin. I love that. I love that, the invoking creativity, where we can imagine all of us sitting at the same table, even though virtually, but, you know, and kind of just all coming from different backgrounds, different perspectives, and yet again, finding commonality and fighting for the voice of the youth to be basically counted, right? We want our voices to be counted. You know, for your information, here in Indonesia, the millennials and the Generation Z, we're basically the majority of our population right now. But you can imagine how difficult sometimes it would be to fight for our voice to be heard, even though we're the majority of the population. So that's something that, you know, I'm sure all of you in some range, you know, is struggling with also in each of your countries. Now, everything that you've all said, amazing points. And now I want to go per track to go more into the nitty gritty and behind the scenes. And this is the part where we get to spill the tea. Because everything sounded great, but now I want to know, what were the points that were quite difficult? Come on, people want to know that, hello, you know, the negotiations, there needs to be some tension for there to have a little bit of, you know, interesting points, right? I mean, I'll share this part. It wasn't easy to edit from 6 pages with full of all the different countries' proposals to make it into 2 pages. It's like, you know, all of us with really good high level, you know, TOEFL and basically SATs had to sit down together to make sure we edit it in a way that doesn't disappoint anyone. I'll go straight back up again to the inclusion and equal opportunity track. So we'll have Puteri, Irem, and Amani. I want to hear within 10 minutes between the 3 of you. what were maybe like that you remember that, okay, that kind of divided us a bit, or that took a little bit longer for us to find the right words? Because I know during my time, sustainability came into the global citizenship, and that was interesting. And I'm interested because Irem is here, because Turkey was the one that was the most like, no, we can't agree with what you're saying, because again, you're not just representing yourself, even though you might agree with the rest of us, but you're also representing your country. So maybe the three of you, again, free flow, within 10 minutes. How was, what were the points? Were there any points within the inclusion and equal opportunity? Because, I'll start with Irem, because I know you feel very strongly, and because you're working within the refugees. I mean, not every country within the G20 has the same views of how to treat refugees and how welcoming a country should be, etc. I know some countries have immigration issues, etc. So what were the points that you felt were the most interesting?
Okay. Well, to be sincere, to be very honest with you, I was expecting much more confrontation within the group. But the most difficult part, I guess, between us was to, basically we were trying to merge the proposals and try to fit them into the word limit so everything was included. I guess that was the most difficult part, because it was very difficult to fit everything in 70 words, basically. But when it comes to my point of view for the negotiations, I felt like, well, when it comes to youth's problem, when you think about the globe, actually most of the problems are quite common. We have problems with gender equality, rights of the people with disabilities, or refugees, etc. Like these were the things that, like, or access to food, access to clean water. These came into discussion, of course. But I felt like instead of repeating the problems that we all know, actually, I mean, at least for me, at least for my point of view, it was much better to advocate for something that as Turkey we do good. I mean, we have some best practices, even though there are some challenges, of course. But it has been a challenge for Turkey since 2011, that since 2015 or 16, I'm not sure, we are currently the country that hosts the biggest refugee community in the world, with more than 4 million people in total. So basically, there are some good practices that we collected in all these years. And actually, I wanted to share these experiences with the other delegates so it could be spread to the other place in the world as well. Because even though we are the country that hosts the biggest community now, it's like the refugee community in the world is equal to the population of Turkey. And now we are coming the climate emergency very soon. So there will be even more refugees. So we need to find a solution for that. We cannot just leave those people there.
Wow.
So that was my idea. Then with Amani, we had a lot of discussions. She had, of course, she would tell hers, but I was supporting her. She was supporting me with Puteri as well. So basically it was all like supporting each other to advocate our cases with higher voices, let's say. So that was my experience. And
so you were the coalition. The three of you were like the coalition here.
I mean, for different issues, there were different coalitions, but I wouldn't say that I wasn't rejecting or objecting any of the ideas, but it was more like I was supporting some more than the others. But at the end, all were in the communique. So it was quite a consensus, actually.
Fantastic. Amani, what would be your response to that in terms of, how you guys were all supporting each other?
I mean, 100%. I think the wonderful and also the challenging thing about being in the Y20, and I think particularly the inclusion track, is that it was really hard for inclusion to be inclusive of everything, because people in different
That's
countries.
a good one.
It was very difficult to have this range of, like, some countries needed accessibility to water and other countries needed accessibility to other financial resources and inclusive finance and so on and so forth. So the needs of each country was very difficult to capture everything in 70 words or less. And everybody coming in with amazing ideas and amazing and different ideas. And I think it was really the hardest part was everybody coming to the middle ground. I mean, we all agreed, for example, we need more accessibility for people with disability to have more inclusive processes. However, it was different from each country to the other. And I think it's something Emiliano had just mentioned. We memed a lot And I think, and it sounds so weird in terms of talking about diplomacy, but it was so interesting in this emergence of diplomacy 2.0, of doing things digitally, of not having and being very confrontational if we were in person. As much as one of my biggest expectations was to be in person and do it in Italy. But in the same time, a lot of the processes of how we did everything online kind of facilitated and prevented issues that could have been more escalated if we were in person. So it was just an interesting, because everybody's coming with different personalities, everybody's coming with their own specific youth related agenda that they wanted to push. But I think the way everybody has handled their own agenda was wonderful. We got to communicate that we came together to make sure, like, you know what, you're really good and you're really passionate about this part, go ahead and work on it. I'm really passionate about this part. And I think the way we divided up the work really resulted in the communique that we have today. And I think that was really a testament to how well young people can work together. Again, like, challenges will happen, whether in person, online, with young people, with old people, whatever you are. But being able to come together was really the challenge. And I think we all really stepped up and were able to get to a point where, like, you know what, this was not bad. I'm happy with how this turned out. And I think this is really a wonderful experience.
Thanks so much. Well, Puteri, I mean, I know you had some issues or some priority points that you were working on yourself as well, and you were very much, I mean, did you find a lot of resistance, or was it all like, again, like, oh, everybody's supporting each other, and like, what points, I mean, maybe you guys can share what points took a little bit longer than others?
Well, for starters, I think one of the biggest challenges in the inclusions tracks negotiations is to narrow down several priority sectors to be the focus of a discussion. Like, it's very hard for us to be inclusive of everything, all this issue in the world. And as a guide, YAS has determined that we have 3 sectors only to be the focus: education, health, and employment. And however, it is clear that the delegates believe that there are other key sectors to be included for our track's recommendations, such as politics, youth empowerment, economics and finance, and human rights, as mentioned by Irem. And as for finance and economic issues, I found allies and countries like France, who happens to work at the Central Bank of France. So we have a lot of common grounds, and we had a lot of bilateral meetings before the pre-NAC happened. And we managed to get the communique to urge the governments to regulate and supervise the financial industry better, and to improve the overall inclusion targets. And I think for somebody who works daily on these cases where, illegal financial companies still manage to rob people out of their money here in Indonesia, and I think that's the case maybe all over the world. That's something to be really proud of. And we also address the barriers and lack of youth representation in leadership. And I talked to Irem about that. I talked to Amani about that. We had a lot of coffee chats before the formal negotiations even happened. And we found that all of our countries have the same problems. That's the barrier to youth politicians are still, high. And so we have to really be able to improve that through Y20.
And I'm already seeing, like, we're gonna go behind the scenes later, but I'm already seeing behind the scenes kind of in the chat, like a lot of internal, like, jokes in there. We're gonna go into that. So don't keep it to yourself. What's with this to GDP or not to GDP? I want to know what does that mean. Okay, so spill. but great. I mean, I'm already seeing, all those points where there were, again, commonalities, especially with youth being in leadership positions, or even just being represented well in the different sectors. And that's part of the inclusion. And I'm glad you guys fought for having more than just those 3 issues that were being highlighted, because again, inclusion, like Amani said, I love what you said, how to be inclusive of everything, but only having such a, like short space to put everything in, right? Again, so for those of you who don't know, in the Y20, basically all these delegates get together and negotiate points to be put into a product that's called communique. And this communique is the end product that they work towards, which they will then give to the leadership of each of their countries, but especially the presidency of the G20, in order for that to be put or included within the G20, basically discussions and their own communique as well. So this is again, this is not a simulation. Apparently, I heard there was a little bit of that issue. This is not a simulation, but it is a platform. It is a real platform for youths to lobby what's important for the youths to the G20 leadership, right? Okay, so yes, I know about that, Emiliano. I got the scoop. So I got inside scoop before I got here on this. So that's why they lobbied me to become the moderator. Irem, do you have something to add?
Yeah, if I have 1 more minute, if that's okay. I just remembered, the simulation thing was something else, but about the rest we would talk in behind the scenes part. But when it comes to, I just remembered, probably Amani and Puteri would agree as well. I guess the problem was that when we were talking about the proposals and inclusion track, you were trying to, they were quite general because we wanted to include all the ideas, but since they were policy proposals, actually they needed to be smart. So the real negotiations, I guess the real conflicts happened at that point. We were all agree with the ideas, but how to formulate them into policy proposals was actually where we had our discussion, let's say. Just wanted to add that.
And I completely agree, because that's also what happened last year. It wasn't that we were saying no, like nobody would say no to things that are, it makes sense, right? For us to fight for things that is important for somebody else. We're not going to say, oh, that's not important. But again, with such a limited space, because we know that the leadership, they're not going to read like a 20-page, kind of like full of recommendations. It's just like, wait, hold on, make it like really succinct, but to the point. Amani, you have something to add. And then after Amani, we're going to do a really short, we're going to just document this, because I know some people cannot stay for the whole time we have here. So Amani, on to you first.
Yeah, I'll just to Irem's point on smartifying objectives. I think that was real, or the policies, and that I think that was the most difficult thing in terms of agreeing on the numbers. What is the target? Are we aiming 2025, 2030? And I think each country had a different target, but also financial commitment. What percentage of the GDP? Do we use GDP? What is the other metrics that are more relevant and more important? And I think all Y20 across all of the different years will agree to these numbers are numbers that we really recommend, but in the end of the day, we really don't know how much of it actually makes it to the reality on the ground, what actually happens. And I think that was where we had the most of discussions, more than actually, nobody could disagree on access to water. Yes, we should definitely have access to water, but how much money do we spend on it from the national GDP? I think that was really what would made it difficult. But otherwise, it was a very interesting process, and definitely teaches you a lot about what does it mean to be truly smart.
Amani, you basically brought up a point, and thank you for thank you for explaining about the GDP or not to GDP, because I was like, what is, but it totally makes sense now, because again, I think through this process, like what Jamilah said. I think it was Jamilah who said, yes, who, you're all diplomats. And this is what I think it's almost like a picture of what the, the ministers of foreign affairs from each country, when they all sit together to kind of lobby each of their country's points, and how to meet between those who are still, developing, those who are still struggling to meet the needs of their people, with those who are already, thinking like, oh, how can we help those who need help? So it's a really interesting point right there, and how, every country, I'm sure, has a different view and has a different way of using, again, GDP. And we know there's a country in the world that has not just a GDP, but also like, happiness index, right? And so this is all these different things. I think, again, it just makes us realize how diverse and how different, and it's not just political, but it's, ideologies, right? It's thinking what's actually really important. Now, on that point, we'll hold, and I'm asking each and every single one of you to turn your cameras on, because before we forget, and before we start, shooting off, doing some of you cannot stay for too long. So, if I can ask the organizers to spotlight all the, certainly the delegates, right? And we'll have a picture taken together. We'll make sure to have everybody. All right, have your big smiles on. Are we going to spotlight everybody, or are you just going to highlight those who have the videos on? Nadia, are you there? Are you going to be giving us the countdown for 3, 2, 1, or am I?
Yes, you can count down for us. Yes,
all right. So you have all of us in one. Okay, we'll start. All right. And apparently my firstborn wants to join. Okay. So next generation right here, preparing the next generation. He's already seeing mama at work. So there won't be any gender inequality with you, buddy. All right. So here we go. In 3, 2, 1. And are we good? Was that it? Was that taken, Nadia? Can you give me a thumbs up?
Yes.
Awesome.
Maybe we can retry once again.
Oh, once again. Okay, for safety, We like safety. All right. Oh, all right. And 3, 2, 1. Okay.
All good.
Good. Great. All right. See, talk about gender equality, Gaia. As a mom of a boy, I say to people, well, I don't need to tell my boy that men and women are equal, because he was born while I was a member of parliament. Shows that women can lead and work and give birth and do all that. And I had to take him on all these trips, even for IPU, IPPF, and all of that while I was breastfeeding. So, real life testimony of women doing it because we can. Okay, right. Moving on to the next subject, right? The next track, we have sustainability, climate, and energy. And I'm totally like, I want to know how it went down, because I know last year, I mean, that was a whole lot of drama. Just talking about, like, as Amani was saying, it was like, oh, what year do we want to use? Which agreements? Like, what standard? And is there any standard that, some countries don't agree on? And I know, as a representative of Indonesia, it's like, well, there are some things that, we want to fight for, but then again, there are some things that we might get in trouble fighting for, right, Dea? So, okay, give the spiel. Who goes first? Who wants to go? Emiliano, how about you? Emiliano, you got things to say. How was it?
Okay. So as I was saying, climate change, everyone agrees climate change is the most important pressing issue we have to solve. The problem is the hows. how do we solve climate change, and what's the technicalities, and what are the technical recommendations we want to make to the G20 leaders. And that's where we find the conflict. And conflict not necessarily in a bad way, but in a way that it takes a lot of hours, it takes a lot of meetings, it takes a lot of bilaterals, of regional meetings, of, you know, waking up at 4 a.m. because you need to negotiate what your country or what your region or what a group of countries, for example,
especially
they and I.
Mexico. 4 o'clock in the morning, especially Mexico.
Yeah, exactly. So first of all, yeah, I just want to bring just two main things. You know, first the energy part. So we know to reach climate change and to reach what the IPCC wants to do, we need to reduce greenhouse gases. That is a must. And how we do it? Through energy. So everybody agrees to this, but it was hard. It was really, really hard to reach a consensus on the really small technicalities, because some wanted community, some wanted another technology, innovation, some wanted to focus on different things. And it was really hard. We had hours. I spent hours on this policy, but I think it was really important. Some people want to add transport, for example, and it was added because we want to be as inclusive as possible. But as Amani was saying, how to be inclusive, but have a very robust policy to recommend, you know? So it was hard, but I think we reached an agreement at the end. Also, there were delegates that were not in the loop, so we had to reopen the Pandora box to continue and to negotiate everything. So I see faces of Dea and Jamilah, and I think that we all agree of this. And also, as some of the saying, 75 words for each policy, that was super hard. So we have to be succinct, we have to be concise, but at the end, I think we reached an agreement. And the second one, and I'm gonna bring the stage, and then maybe Dea can compliment me, because we were working very, very hard, since we are both mega diverse countries. Also, Canada is a mega diverse country. We want to talk about the natural environments and biodiversity, and we thought about, you know, the importance of mega diverse countries, the importance of nature, the importance of biodiversity, of communities, of indigenous communities, etc. And there was one delegation who wanted to push on a very innovative idea, but not very applicable to all countries, especially to the global south, which was about bringing the moon as a part of a natural environment. And yes, you heard me right, the moon. So Dea and I and Brazil and Argentina and a lot of mega diverse global south countries, we fought a lot to try to mitigate this. At the end, we want to be inclusive. We brought it, but we were fighting a lot, you know, to bring.
I remember when Dea was saying this, I was like, wait, come again? We didn't have that last year.
Yeah, and it was very innovative, but it was not necessarily what we need, you know, to fight climate change. So yeah, maybe they can compliment me on this, but these were the two main, for me specifically, was the two main sources of conflict. And again, conflict not in a bad way, but in a way that it required a lot of negotiation, diplomacy to reach an agreement. And the good thing is that at the end we reached it, and it's on the communique, and what the work that we have been doing, it's there. And I'm very happy, you know, that even if we disagree on a lot of things, we worked a lot on other things. So that's part of the beauty of diplomacy. You can disagree, but it's not personal. It's because you are representing the youth of your country. And yeah, so that's basically a little bit of what I want to say. And maybe Dea can compliment me on the natural environments, and she's an expert on environments and biodiversity.
But before we go, and thank you, Emilio, but before we go to, Emiliano. Oh, it's like, because, you know, the common name is more known as Emilio, right? Emiliano. But,
Yeah.
Dea, before we go to you, I know, Jamilah, you have to go in about 5 minutes. So maybe you can also add, aside from, you know, the things that were highly debated, and I want to know more about, was it just the moon, or did somebody bring up Mars? Yeah, I don't know, you know, I mean, like, wow, we're kind of having a hard time coming into commonality just on our own planet, and somebody's bringing up a different, you know, so the moon. So, okay, Jamilah, so aside from, you know, all those issues with behind the scenes and the discussions you guys had, perhaps before you go, you can also add, you know, what would be the key points that you would like, you know, the youths who will be you'll be passing on the torch to, what would be your hopes for the youth and perhaps even just for the future of Y20? Go ahead, Jamilah.
Thank you so much. I feel a bit bad. It's this statistics class that I have coming up. I can stroll in a few minutes late. It's no worries. I think the transition from Emiliano to Dea actually might be really nice, and I can stick around a few more minutes and chat because I'll actually bring up, I think, totally different points. So thank you so much for being, considerate of time. I appreciate that, but I'll stick around because I think it'll be a nice flow between the three of us.
Oh,
that's okay.
All right. So Dea, 3 minutes so she can talk a bit and without getting too late. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. I'll expand on what Emiliano said a little bit, and maybe we can go to Jamilah, and maybe if there's anything else to add, then we can. Then I can add more after that. So to expand a little bit on the outer space proposal, the outer space proposal. So the outer space issue is that it is quite underregulated one, and there's also a huge gap, as Emiliano said, between the needs of the global north and the global south. And it's a really hard, both of those factors make it really hard to consolidate into anything really of substance, let alone a 75-word proposal. And while the negotiations were Asian, we say a lot, which translates to chewy, as in kind of it's drawn out. But finally, we reached a compromise is in the final communique, which I believe people can access. But it was quite difficult trying to consolidate that idea with the natural environments that we wanted to talk about in our proposal. Because while, yeah, sure, it's an underregulated issue, but it's also not an environment, as in our definition of the word as it is now. And I believe that this topic was not just in the natural systems proposal, it was also in the circular economy and waste under the term of space junk, which is also another issue that is
okay. When you bring up space junk, then I think more people can kind of relate and thinking okay, that's gonna affect this our environment here, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you bring that into okay, we get that.
Yeah, right, exactly. So it is an issue. I'm not saying that it's not important, but we also have 75 words and really broad topics. So we want to be both broad and succinct. I don't know how to pronounce that word. How do we even balance that? I've been
you guys had a harder time because this, the word limit last year, it was only 2 pages. So here it's word limit. I mean, that's a bigger challenge. So I salute you guys, So again, Dea, we can always come back to you real quick, but I want to give a chance to Jamilah. Jamilah, so what if you can compliment what they were saying, what were, okay, let's move past the space junk and the moon, but what are the last year, it was really about the standard, and then it was about, whether or not to use a certain climate conference standard as the one that everybody agrees on, because there were countries who didn't sign it, right? It was part of the G20. So how was it, Jamilah?
You know what? So I personally, in the policies that I was working most in, didn't experience this to the extent as other policies that I knew this was happening. And I think this is because, one of the policies I worked very, very, very closely with on was a sustainable finance proposal. And the thing with sustainable finance is that it's relatively new, the concept, and B, it's only very recently that governments are saying, oh my gosh, we need to consider sustainable finance policies, but we don't have any. So For example, like our sustainable finance policy was actually and has been, harboring government interests. I know EU and Canada are interested in this policy, and we hope that gets shared around to other countries, because governments are thinking, hey, we need solutions now, and we don't actually have any because no one's really been working super hard on this. And I can't say no one. Obviously, it's something that's being worked on, but so Y20, what do you have for us? That's what I found. But anyways, in terms of negotiations, just in a general sense, what I found was, and what I learned and what was hard, because I like getting things done and being efficient, etc. But these things take a long, long time. Negotiations are slow, and you have to be strategic in a more friendly sense, and that like these bilaterals that you have to have, bilaterals as like meetings, like Dea and I, Emiliano and I, maybe just one-on-one or with other people or whatever. These things have to happen, and they take a lot of time, and you have to build rapport. And it's hard when we're all across the world and we're trying to build rapport, but this is how we were able to negotiate. Was honestly, I found friendship building. This is how we agreed with each other. I know that in one instance, another delegate and I had really similar interests, and when we started splitting up into policy proposal groups, he's like, you go here and I'll go here, because this is a team effort. And the thing with negotiations, it's a team effort. So yeah, it's just remembering that as much as we want to change the world, this is a team effort. These things take a really long time. Sometimes you'll be exhausted, but you can't stop. Yeah. You can't. Yeah. I remember at one point, and I'll wrap this up quick, but at one point, negotiations on the actual week of negotiations, or the week of the summit, they changed for one day. And of course, they changed to the 1 hour that I completely wasn't going to be available. I would have been in airport security at the time. So yeah. I'm in airport security, and I get a message from a fellow delegate saying, we're talking about the policy proposal that we've been working on. We need you here now. I'm like, oh, can someone explain? And they're like, no, because if you don't get on here and sort of explain in the way you have to explain it, I think, perhaps I'm good at storytelling and getting people on board. They're like, we might lose this point. Right. So I'm in airport security. There's like loud sounds everywhere. I ended up finding like a staff staircase in the airport to like huddle in to be as quiet as possible, to be like, Canada supports this and thinks this, and for XYZ reasons, we avoided a vote. It was crazy, but anyways, negotiations are a team effort. If anything I learned, it's this, and you have to keep going. You'll get exhausted. It's the nature of negotiations, but you can't stop.
Well, I'm glad, again, thank you so much, Jamilah. On that point, I think you already kind of give a little bit of a pointer. So also for the next, don't give up, right? Just keep going, and negotiations part of the art of diplomacy. And on that note, I know somebody else who has to go as well. So I'm going to go straight. So Jamilah, thank you so much. If you have to go, completely understand. Thank you for joining us all the way from Canada, and all the best for you. But I want to go straight to Gaia, who's in the next one, which is innovation, digitalization, and future of work. Gaia, are you here with us? All right. So I know you have to go. So go ahead. Whatever you have to say, in terms of what the negotiations were like, behind the scenes, and what would be your message for future young diplomats?
Yeah, well, I think, and I'm curious to hear from Dustin and Angelo, but I think especially for the digitalization, there was just like a lot going on. There was so much going on behind the scenes. It was a fascinating process, but I'm really excited to see how the Indonesian organization will be able to build on these lessons learned for the future. I resonate with a lot of the observations from the previous delegates. I think for us, you could boil it down to two main issues or observations, and that was the importance of structure from the convener, and the importance of openness from the participants. So I think regarding structure, for us, it was virtual. We had no idea really what was going on. It was, this was a new framework. COVID was happening. Like what were we going to do? And there was such a high level of freedom to design the negotiation process, and this lack of guidance and protocol was somewhat challenging. And to build on what Jamilah had said, this became very strategized. It was about convincing people and doing bilaterals and creating factions and people who agreed on the same things or disagreed on the same things. And I think this could have been mitigated so that we would have time to, refine policies with the appropriate focus and consideration. I'm very proud of the communique and what we've achieved, but we want to get it as best as it could be, and these were some of the setbacks that could be improved on for future Y20s. And I think regarding openness from participants, it's really interesting to hear what Emiliano and Gaia said from the climate track about Global South representation and different priorities. Of course, we know there are different priorities. And of course, that's the beauty of the Y20. You have such a diverse cohort from so many different places. But there are these clashing ideas and ideologies and ways of seeing the world that weren't necessarily representative, and it's a dynamic that's too often reflected at the high level. I see this within the UN. You see the global north dominating conversation. You see people from backgrounds of intersecting privileges dominating the conversation, and thus the final output has criticisms of being ethnocentric or whitewashing. And you see this with some of the resolutions from the General Assembly, for instance. But to a lesser extent, we could try and mitigate this within the framework of diplomacy amongst Y20. And yeah, just have the perspectives of those from the global south and from minority groups that are so often not heard in these spaces anyway. That's all from me. I'd be super interested to hear what Dustin and Angelo have to say on this. I feel like I've sort of unpacked quite a lot.
No, you did great. I mean, you mentioned, and again, Angelo was like, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Like, yes, good point, good point. No, I mean, great points, Gaia. But again, I know you have to go. So any few last words before you go?
I'll stay on just for a little bit, but I'll dash it half-assed, yeah.
All right. Thanks so much again. So Dustin, Angelo, I mean, those were great points that Gaia mentioned, and it was, I mean, it's more about, again, the whole negotiation. And again, I also agree with you, Gaia, the point that was mentioned by Dea about the global north and the global south, and this was an interesting point, especially. I don't know how if this even came up in the future of work or the digitalization aspect. But I remember last year I brought up the point during one of my interventions in that, like, if COVID didn't really hit the developed countries, I wonder, I mentioned this, I wonder if it would be called a global pandemic, versus all the other pandemics we're facing in the developing countries. They are just as dire, and until now we still have not found a vaccine or any kind of just like, for example, what's the word, dengue fever, for example. I mean, something that in other countries, like, oh, it's no problem, but more people die from that here in Indonesia, for example, than they do from COVID. And that's been happening years and years and years and years. So it's very interesting that you kind of, all of you, experiencing that and mentioning that in a different context, but still kind of with the same kind of questions. And it just goes to show, right, that the youths are global citizens, because we are so, with digitalization, right, with innovation, we're a lot more in touch with what's going on in a country we've never visited before. We have no idea what it looks like if it weren't for digitalization. So Dustin, going to you, I mean, how do you respond to that? how or what were the points that you felt, as an American citizen, right? I mean, when you're listening to these different citizens from different countries, the context of how different digitalization and future of work and perhaps the bigger context might be the same, but the experience, I mean, how was there anything that you felt was like, oh my gosh, I did not think of that before? Like, was there any of those moments?
Well, let me just start by saying that innovation, digitalization, and future of work are like three separate topics, right? The idea that we need to talk about all of them together was sort of trying to like really thread a very hard needle. So when I think about those three topics in full, it felt as though we could go in hundreds of different directions. And what's invoked when we bring those themes together are themes around education, themes around workforce development, themes around digital security, digital privacy. And I think that was the most challenging part. People read the themes and read the descriptions in completely different ways. And I felt that the moment we had our first bilaterals, realizing that people were approaching it from their own perspectives and noticing that our lived experiences were shaping the way in which we even received the title, felt as though we were in the same library, but reading different books. So I think I'll start there. That was a major tension that I found, right? Everyone was sort of, we're in the same place, but we're completely on different books because we were receiving that one theme completely differently.
Yes.
Another tension that came up for me, and this is just building off of what Gaia shared, is this understanding that there was sort of a lack of structure, and because of the limited time frame, and because everyone was in school, working, being a person, being a human, being a partner, being a friend, being a family member, right? All of these things conflated at a point where it felt as though when we jumped online, we didn't necessarily have a direction because we weren't necessarily sure where we were building towards. It's sort of like, hey, like, let's all build, let's all move forward, but we weren't really sure what that final destination was. And I felt as though that structure actually limited the ability to have really deliberative dialogue or deliberative conversation. I think an endpoint of that, a part of that is the fact that we weren't necessarily sure about the pragmatism around our recommendations. I realized that this was a real tension in terms of what people were recommending, right? What does it mean to say that we need to be pragmatic and have G20 leaders really recognize and receive what we're saying versus the fact that as young people, we should be pushing the envelope and thinking imaginatively. I know that some folks brought policies to the table. I'm like, I pray that that happens, but like absolutely in no way, shape or form are we going to come up with $17 billion to make that happen, right? It feels as though, it almost feels like we're wasting space on the communique, while other delegates had very different perceptions around the need to sort of put a stake in the sand and say, this is actually what we should be working towards. So that was another tension that came up.
Dustin, you kind of sound like me. We're like the practical, like realistic, like maybe because I was in the House of Rep for 5 years, I'm like, yeah, those things are not gonna get passed.
And it feels like it's a thought exercise, right? And I think as much as possible, the invoking this idea that this is a true document, this is something that is supposed to be the collective voices of so many young people, allows me to understand that for me, that was a tension that wasn't necessarily clear and limited our ability to push forward. And maybe a last piece I just want to pull off of something that Gaia had shared is that I think people move at the speed of trust. That's my own leadership philosophy, right? We move at the speed of trust. And so often not having the chance to be in space with one another, not having the chance to even see people on camera, because I was sleeping. Emiliano, God bless you. I was not up at 3 a.m., right? There were certain barriers that I made for my own self-care and my own well-being. I was like, I'm not going to do that. So there were people that I didn't see until the official negotiations. I was like, wow, it's great to put a face to a name because it just didn't work out. We weren't sharing space with each other, and I didn't have a chance to get them to know each other as friends. And I think at a certain point, I realized that those friendships were invoked in really beautiful ways when we were trying to dialogue and get to different collaborations. But at the end of the day, there were still people that I didn't have a chance to understand their root causes or understand their perspectives. And it was then very difficult to negotiate in the moment to say, I actually really disagree with that, but we don't have a foundation of trust to push this conversation forward.
Wow. Yeah. What, like so many different quotes, I love it, like moving forward at the speed of trust. Is that right, Dustin? I feel like that's going to be like my new like profile, whatever, of the week, it's like moving forward at the speed of trust. And it's so true because again, last year was the first time that we couldn't convene physically, and the structure as well. Angelo, we're part of the presidency team for next year. And that's actually one thing, just so you know, for whoever's going to be signing up for next year, we will have a protocol in place. Okay. We will have structure. Okay. So that's because I'm hearing that from both Gaia and Dustin. I feel like some of you were resounding to the lack of structure or the lack thereof, whichever you want to look at it. As in, there might be some who have experiences like Gaia would, with the UN, have experiences and exposure to negotiations and a communique and, you know, like a document kind of building, right? But whereas others, no experience whatsoever, and without that kind of guiding structure, everybody kind of goes their own way on what would be the main points. Now, Angelo, I know you got a lot to say in terms of behind the scenes. So, you, I mean, it was like us reading his point. It's like he's like, can you imagine this is happening? I'm like, okay, what's going on now? So Angelo, I'm giving you the time and space, you know, to perhaps represent your fellow delegates in telling us, like, you know, what were the points that were, you know, the most difficult, or even nothing to do with the points, but just because I got to bring these 2 points together just because of our, you know, limitation in time. But what was it like, Angelo? I mean, again, because they mentioned structure, and then, you know, talking about how the negotiations, again, not being able to meet in person, and then, you know, Jamilah earlier mentioned about how she was working and had to find a quiet corner to kind of fight for what she believed in, right? Otherwise it would have been scrapped. So how was it, Angelo?
Yeah, so I sort of limit I wrote a note so that I limit myself on what things can I say. Yeah, so let me start with this, Ma.
You want to do the censored version? We'll give you space for the uncensored version later. No worries. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, in the last day of our summit, we still negotiated our communique. And like just minutes before we presented to our Sherpa, to the Italy's Sherpa, we were trying to agree on the wording of some paragraphs. So that's how dynamic our track was. And I think it all boils down to one thing, I think, yeah. I agree with Dustin mentioning that you know, innovation, digitalization, and future of work are 3 different separate issues, right? And also I echo what Gaia said on the lack of structure during our negotiation, right? Now the issue note of our track, I think like 90% of them they talk about the future of work. But then the organizing committee sort of expected us to talk about innovation, digitalization, and future of work in 3 different pillars. So I think just the preparation from the organizing team side is very important. So I think when we're talking about the lesson for next year, that's something that we can work on. But I think sort of like our presidency has prepared for that. But yeah, I really agree on what Gaia and what Dustin said about like the lack of structure and how should we mitigate that in the future. So maybe I'll stop there first for like further exploration. But
okay, before you go, Gaia, you got any last words? You know, go ahead.
No, it's good.
She's keeping it safe. She's like, they'll represent me.
They'll do a good job. I have full faith in these 2. They're incredible delegates, and I love them.
So on that note, it means that Dustin, Angelo, you've gained her trust, right?
Trust, we're there.
So it means that like I can trust them to negotiate for me, because that was something that I think perhaps, you know, Jamilah has, you know, couldn't find. Everybody else was like, no, you gotta fight for this point because you can deliver that better than we can, right? So, but in that, you know, that's how you find that sometimes it's about working together to find, okay, you know what, you're good on this point, so how about you talk about it, and you're good on this point, so how about you talk about it, and having that. And it's crazy to hear that even until the very last moments, you are all still talking about the paragraph and all of that. I mean, well, with us, we already finished the discussion before the summit. So during the summit, what happened was just us watching talk shows or being part of the talk shows, but all of it was already done beforehand. And poor organizing team had to kind of stay up all night to talk to all of us, because there were those conflicting points, right? So on that note, I'll go to the and again, you know, I'll Gaia, I think are you leaving? Is that a or
yeah? I was saying bye.
Thank you so much for joining us, Gaia.
Take care.
Take care. All right. So, Gio, on that note, I want to go into the last points, right? Which is, you know, with everything that was now key takeaways, right? what would be, because again, it was really interesting hearing structure-wise, because I know some delegates, even from the previous years, preferred being kind of like, oh, no, yeah, that's, the delegates need to decide everything. The delegates should just have full control. Whereas my experience, and I think Puteri would also, resound with this, in international, at least the parliamentarians level, usually negotiations are already done very structured because there's already a proposed draft, either by a specific country or by the organizing committee. And then each country would give, like feedback, oh, the wording for this, we would propose to be changed to this, or we propose to put in this point underneath point 3C or something like that, right? So it's a huge range. Now here I'm hearing that more delegates would wish to have more structure. I mean, again, as like the next presidency, I think this is so important for us to get feedback. I'll kind of just open the floor. Anybody want to have a say in that? Or does anybody disagree? Like, would they prefer the way it was done, especially with the, more flowing? Amani, how was it for you?
Yes, thank you very much. Just to say first, I'm in the airport, so if you hear loud noises, so sorry about that. But I actually wanted to say it's not so much that you needed a lot of structure, but more like guidelines. What is the process? Understanding what is the expectations out of each track. So a lot of us kind of worked on what we saw from last year and kind of copy paste, but then realized that wasn't really the case here, and that the organizers or different people wanted to do it differently, but then it wasn't communicated across all 60 people. So I think it was really this 2 points: it's guidelines, processes, and communication. And I think those 2 points were like their key points to making, I think, any summit or any project being more effective than it kind of were. But it's something also I wanted to mention that Dustin kind of flagged with me when he was speaking about, if innovation and how we as young people needed to be innovative and out of the box, and maybe actually just like throw out the box and burn it altogether. But what we've noticed is that a lot of people kind of fall into these antiquated measures of how diplomacy is supposed to be done, kind of trying to mimic how older generations and more seasoned diplomats do it. But then the way I was reflecting at it is that those processes weren't efficient, and that's why young people voices are needed in these kind of spaces. We need to be more innovative, more agile, and have the vision to process, to make the processes smoother. Not say, we have a representative and we have to be very, very specific, using hard language and very specific jargon, but actually be more fluid in how we did it. At least that's how I saw, or I hope future Y20 will be more in that sense and have the really more youthful spirit in the way it's done, not just the final outcome. Over to you.
Fantastic. Okay, Emiliano, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. So I have 5 main takeaways of the Y20 that I want to share with you guys, and I hope that my fellow delegates also, and fellow delegates and friends also, I hope they also agree with me. But specifically for climate, I think there's an ambitious consensus for ambitious climate actions. So that's great. I love that. Climate action is the most and the one thing that we need to be working on, and I love that. But more talking about Y20, I think that cooperation is key, and as it is in a high level, political will is the key to actually achieve consensus, and we achieve this through bilateral reunions. We achieve this through climate cafes or innovation cafes or inclusive cafes, or however you call it in your tracks. Political will and being there and deciding and helping your friends, that was the key, for success and for actually reaching consensus. A third thing that I will say is that virtuality was a challenge, and even though we know that it's good, like we are right now in various different countries and talking and sharing, but for negotiations, that was a challenge. And because of time zones, because of reaching agreements, as we know, negotiations are on the back end, like how they say, actually negotiations is the informal part of the things. When you're in the negotiations, you say your speech, but what actually was agreed was what was said on the bilateral or whatever. And also communication, it's very hard in the virtuality. And finally, also pandemic burnout. Pandemic burnout, as Dustin was saying, that's something that we need to take into account. Healthcare and health, the healthcare of the people, being okay, and communication transparency. That's something between delegates, but also with the organization. It's a must that have to be taken into account, especially transparency. Also something that it's a little bit contentious, but the limit of saying inclusion, because sometimes when we use inclusion as an excuse, it's sometimes used to exclude all the other delegates. And I know that some delegates from here will agree with me. We use the flagship of inclusion, but at the end we end up excluding other people or their ideas and other decisions. And finally, this is very cheesy, but the delegates, the friendship, the friendship that we made during this negotiation, even if it was virtual, was the reason of the success of this year's Y20. So I think that's the most important. I love the phrase that Dustin said, but yeah, that's some of the key takeaways that I take from this Y20.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Emiliano. And again, you brought up very good points, especially in terms of political will. That would be my next question, actually, to all of you, as in like, what's next, right? In terms of this, is it just the communique, or is there going to be a follow-up, right? So that would be my next. But now, Irem, floor is yours.
Thank you. Just a couple of things that I want to mention about the process overall. I feel like even though I had some friendship over the process, but still having the summit virtual actually wasn't making it easier to have a personal connection with the people, because at the end, when we were together, if we were talking about the communique, but if we were together face to face, we would go out together, we would have coffee breaks together, we would have some events together. So I guess the level of communication would be much higher. But of course, there was the pandemic, and I really understand that some of the countries was not in position to risk their health because we were vaccinated. We were quite lucky, but that was not the case for everyone, which was actually one of our proposals in the inclusion track. And secondly, again, being about virtual, accommodating people in a virtual space was much more different, in the sense that actually that was advocated by another delegate, but I want to transfer here to you guys as well, because you will be the host next year. So the thing is that once when you invite people to your home country to host them in a summit, actually you take care of everything. If that person has disability, you accommodate them in a way. If they're vegan, vegetarian, if they have internet, if they have laptops, like you just take care of all the communication stuff. But when you require that person to participate in the summit a couple of hours every day, I'm talking about the big summit, not negotiations. Actually, how would you make sure that this person has internet? This person is not living in a crowded household. This person has access to these kind of stuff, So that was, I think, a bit more of a challenge. I send my salutations to Rory from here. That was her. And what else? Lastly, in my case, that would be a comment for the last host and a recommendation for you. I would need a much more clear rules of procedure, because at the end of the finalization, I had some concerns about finalization of the communique, but it was very difficult to find the right answer for my concerns, and actually I couldn't get very satisfying answers, let's say. But at the same time, if I had, let's say, a book or like a guide or a couple of pages about the rules, how to finalize, actually, I don't really exactly remember, but there was no sheet that says that it was consensus, then it would go with qualified majority afterwards, etc. But we learned it by the process. But at the same time, what if we don't have a majority? You just skip that. But at the end of the day, like at the end of the summit, we already had the name of the number of the summits, which was limited. So we just skip one. Like what we would do, just like a really clear and strict rules of procedure that we all have to follow. And if there is any concerns, we could just go look up and raise the concern and say, look, that's not right. And when you don't have a guide, it was quite difficult for me. And yeah, I would just leave it to you, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Irem. So I think you brought up again something that's been kind of resounding. I think, Angelo, we need to kind of really jot this down, and something that my colleagues and I, especially in the delegate relations, will be handling for next year: rules of procedure, right? I think, it was mentioned over guidelines, right? Whether it's structure, guidelines, or rules of procedure, just how to get like, what are the timelines for the negotiation? Like, where do we, and by the way, us in the previous year also only found out at the end that it needed to be a consensus, like it needed to be a unanimous decision. And it was difficult because the one country who had an issue with like a really crucial point only appeared at like the last 3 days of negotiation. So all of us already did everything until like finally the last 3 days that country appeared, and it was like, okay, you're not accepting this. So what's going on? And so, again, it's one of those things that I think needed to be communicated earlier on. And another challenge would be, I don't know, I mean, this could be a random question, but just before we go into the what's next, what was it like dealing with, some who were very active and some who were not? Because I'm sure it was a little bit like that, right? I mean, with the virtual, I'm sure, was it just my year? Was it just my year where we had like 5 people doing the whole editing, and then only at the end or like certain days that people would show up to kind of say yes or no? Like, who wants to talk about that? Like, Dustin, I look at your face and you're kind of like, I'm so tempted. But no, Irem, you were going to say something.
I don't know. I was about to say, like, since I'm on the spotlight already, I can start with it. I would say, like, there were some of the delegates, like, in our track that, correct me if I'm wrong, Puteri and Amani, but they were not very active. Actually, we have seen them maybe only once. And there were some of them that they were actually having some bilaterals and like group meetings, etc., every day, which I wasn't able to follow up really. Like sometimes I was like, okay, no, I really can't today. I need to sleep. But yeah, like some of the people were quite active, and you see them in every meeting, and they were quite, loud. Not loud in bad sense, but they were outspoken. No, not in bad sense. No.
Outspoken.
Outspoken, exactly. So I would say, like, yes, there were like active and a bit less active members, but I guess it's quite normal. But it was actually different than what I thought when I think about the political situation in the countries. So I expected some of them, let's say, I won't give the name, but to be much more active, while some of the countries that are not that much on the scene in the political life, they were actually quite active. So it was more about the individual leadership. So it felt like I was representing my country, yes, but 20 of us, we are actually G20 youth. So some of us just take the lead,
Yeah, good points, Irem. A lot of it is nothing to do with the country itself and their points. It's just individual leadership. So Amani, on that.
Just on leadership, I just want to say shout out to Mexico for taking really the lead across all of the different tracks. I would say they did an amazing job in making sure we were always on time, on point, and on track. I think everybody really, like you said, like it's really took a lot of leadership individually and collectively to make sure that people were on track. They were doing their tasks. They were obviously people who just weren't as interested or enthusiastic. Somebody made an interesting point that countries in the global South were more enthusiastic about countries in the global North. Other people were like, more people in the G20 are more excited than people who their countries are represented in the G7. So it was just really interesting, but it really boiled down to people personalities. In the end of the day, people who are willing to get up at 4 a.m. or 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning, and other people who are just like, you know what, I need to do other things and this is not a priority for me. So I think it was really different, but I think in the end of the day, people who participated, it really, the Y20 for me, it's as much as you put into it, you get out of it, whether it's experience, it's knowledge, it's visibility, or whatever you need, development in terms of your career, and also pushing your countries and your youth agenda in a global stage. But and obviously it was different for everybody, and other people have their own commitments, but it was just very interesting to see how everybody interacted and how much people wanted to be part of it and how much others weren't just as interested. And I just think that was really interesting to see.
It's such a good thing to hear from all of you, also bringing up about the mental health, right? I mean, putting barriers for yourself and knowing, like, right now I gotta sleep. I remember, because we were negotiating like quite late for Indonesia, so you can imagine Australia, it was like 3 a.m. for them. And I remember my colleague, the Australian delegate, already had he had a blanket around him because it was so cold at 3 a.m. over there, and the things that, we go through to fight for what we believe in, but at the same time knowing, like, hey, like, just this is a challenge for virtual, right? This is a challenge when you're all talking in completely different time zones, and it's not easy. It's not easy, Okay, so great points, and thank you so much for sharing. I wish we had more time, but again, we only have such time. And before we end this, I want to give a chance for everyone to kind of like share, like, what's next, like what's been going on for you since the Y20 summit. I mean, what have you done? I know Indonesian delegates, so maybe Puteri or Dea or Angelo can share about like what's been going on since the Y20 summit, like what have we been preparing for next year? That's as a follow-up, and it's not just like cut off like that. So we'll start with these three, although you can be represented from either one of you. And then I want to give a chance for the others to also maybe share. You can even say like, oh, you know what? It's actually a challenge for us to lobby our government because the Y20 isn't really like seen in my country. I don't know, share with us. So who wants to take it for the Indonesian delegates? Who wants to I think Angelo's biting at the, but yeah, go ahead, Angelo.
Oh, I mean, Putri can take it because she's the head of delegate.
All right, Put. As a member of parliament and representative of the people and the youth, so what's been going on? Like what's next?
Well, we've been working closely with Basara and all of our friends in IYD to hold discussions and convey the Y20's recommendations to our government, of course, through related ministries officials. And we met with the Sherpa office the other day to inform him about our communique, which we translate to Indonesian. Kudos to Angelo and Dea for doing it even after the event finished, so we can better disseminate the results of the communique to the ministries here. And as a young member of parliament, of course, it is indeed my responsibility to promote youth-related issues. And in my commission, I've been promoting about our communique to our ministers, such as the Minister of Finance and also Bank of Indonesia as the central bank. And I am planning to do so until my period ends at the end of 2024. And as the Indonesian Parliament Youth Caucus Chair, I am also working on our commitment to build an open and transparent parliament, by bridging the communication between youth and students with young lawmakers. So I've been seeing groups of youth from the climate tracks, from all the other tracks, to discuss about the Y20 communique and what we are going to do next year as the host. So there are many channels and plans for us as delegates to put the recommendations in motion in our respective fields, of course. And I think that with IYD support as our mother here in Indonesia, and that the fact that Indonesia will host the Y20 next year, we must advocate for its implementation at home first, and then first and foremost. So that's from me, Basara.
So she's basically doing her job.
Basara, if I can add just a little bit, but
all right.
So
One
in the
minute.
same, absolutely. So just in the same event that Puteri mentioned, where we disseminated our communique to the related ministries, right? We also invited other engagement groups of the G20 in Indonesia, right? The Urban 20, Women 20, and other engagement groups, but also with the Ministry of Youth, right? Because we will be working with them for next year and hosting the Y20. They've been really curious on what we did this year and the year before that, right? So we sort of disseminated that with them as well. And I sort of want to share it here. So this year's chair of ASEAN is Brunei Darussalam, right? So the youth ministry of Brunei Darussalam, working together with the ASEAN Secretariat, they just organized this ASEAN Innovation Platform Dialogue. So I was the Indonesian delegate there as well, and I absolutely advocated for what we agreed on Y20 to the ASEAN level as well, so that we have to streamline youth voices, right, across like different regional platforms and multilateral platforms as well. I think that's what I want to convey as well, Basara.
Fantastic. So again, different levels. This is all youth representing in different levels. So great. Thank you so much, Puteri, Angelo. I want to go to the other ones yet. Dustin, again, to you. What's next? Because I know you just graduated again. With education. Like what would be the next step in the whole advocacy, right, for the youth's voice?
Yeah, I think that's a complicated question, because I think it changes, when I talk to young people, and it changes when I share the communique with young people. I think that at its core, it's sort of keeping the energy alive and keeping everyone aware that these issues start to change and continue to change over time. I think my main point in sharing that, and from an educational standpoint, it talks about how we should have every single young person see themselves as a Y20 delegate. I think it's been really interesting for me to engage with young people and feel as though there is a distance, but in actuality, we're bringing their voices to the table, and they should see themselves in the document. And if that's not there, that's something that we should shift for next year. So for me, in my perspective, it's sort of empowering every single person to see themselves as a Y20 delegate, because in so many ways, that is the platform that we're given from the G20.
Spoken so well as an activist. I'm wondering, because education means you're going to be like what, a teacher, right? Yes,
Educator.
But I think you might be. You can add activists in there as well. youth advocate. All right. So Irem, your turn now.
I'm sorry for jumping in. I just need to run in a bit that I have a meeting. So I wanted to say a couple of words before I leave. I feel like, of course, we transfer this communique to our government, but more than that, actually, my priorities was Turkish youth priorities. But at the same time, I learned many new stuff, like algorithmic bias was one of the things that I never thought about before, or universal broadband was quite discussed in our track, and that was kind of things that we knew, but I never actually thought on them. So now after Y20, what I was doing was that actually I was spreading these ideas that I learned from my colleagues in the summit, and that would be my words. And thank you very much for inviting, but I need to go. Thank you, Puteri, for inviting and organizing this.
Thank you so much. And I know Dustin also needs to leave. So really quickly to Emiliano, and then Amani, and then Dea, you can kind of close it up. Thank you, Irem.
Yeah, thank you. So it's really important, we have the communique, but what's next, right? So what we actually did was to talk with the Ministry of Foreign Relations of Mexico to share these recommendations in different tracks, the key takeaways, what we are doing here, but with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We published the communique also in Spanish. with a nice and colorful design, so it's interesting for young people. With images and everything. I can share it to you guys. We publish an article in the media so everyone can understand what the Y20 is for starters, because not everyone knows what the Y20 is. And we also push recommendation with different ministries, like the Ministry of Youth and others. And I was also invited by the International Climate Initiative, by the Ministry of Environment of Germany, to talk with various climate leaders, their recommendations and various works. So I actually pushed the recommendation of the Y20 with International Climate Initiative. So those are some of the things that we were doing as a delegation. And of course, the summit is right on the corner, at the end of October. And we hope really that this recommendation that we are taking are brought onto the October Rome summit. So I just want to leave saying that I'm so grateful for the Indonesian youth diplomats for organizing this. This is amazing. Angelo, Puteri, Dea, Sarah, I know you're gonna do amazing for next Y20. So congratulations. You're so amazing, and I wish the best of luck. And anything you need, you have the Mexican delegation of the 2020 for anything you need.
Oh, Emiliano, thank you. Thank you. I think you've
Mexico.
just won the hearts of not just us, but like everybody who's watching this in Indonesia. You're welcome in Indonesia anytime. Just let us know. Amani, over to you.
Can't top what Emiliano said, but I also really echo, thank you very much for the opportunity. I think this was a really nice discussion, and it was just like it brought up so many emotions about the Y20. And I think really being really thankful for the Indonesian delegation. They were super cooperative, and every conversation we've had was always, me and Puteri always had like really enlightening conversations, really agreed a lot on how our policies were. And I think even moving forward with next year, we really wish you all the best of luck. And also Saudi Arabia is here to help. I know you've already been in contact with our Sherpa as well. So I know we're here to support you anytime. And on some of the efforts we've done from our end, we haven't really translated the communique in Arabic because people were very familiar with the Y20 because Saudi hosted last year. But in the same time, we've done some interviews. We've presented obviously to the Sherpa as well. And, we keep advocating from our end on really to local communities and talking about what we've done. And I think that's really what I would love the Y20, I love in the summit for everything to be adapted, but I also really wish for local action to have really young people adapt all the policies and try to implement as much as they can on their own communities, be it small communities, micro communities, and so on. But again, thank you so much, Indonesia, for hosting us and the Indonesian youth diplomacy. And obviously, Indonesia is on my bucket list. And so please invite me, and I'm happy to come anytime. And thank you so much. Terima kasih.
We'll take you up on that. And I still need to go over there because last year I couldn't go. Okay. So anyway, right. Putting that in there, Amani, just in case. I don't know where you're going because you're in the airport, and I can't believe you're joining us at the airport, my Lord. Thank you. We appreciate you. And Dea, you're here to bring this home.
All right. Wish me luck. So I do want to echo what Amani said about being like working local and collaborating. Because while I think that a lot of change can happen at the governmental level, at like the people like leading G20 Sherpas and leaders of state and whatnot, there's also great strength in working across different fields. So like government, local, private, or diversity, technology, sustainability. And I think that and I'm really glad, like at least for the Indonesian delegates, I'm really glad we have Puteri, who is in the parliament, and then there's Angelo, who is exposed to like so many different like organizations, both national and local. And then like I have my own little bubble here and like the work I do in my area. And like that broad reach, I think is not just for us Indonesians, but I think for all the other delegates in Y20, I think that's something very valuable that we have, and that's definitely our step forward. Just bring in the communique in whatever sway we have in policy. That's the direction we're heading now. And also because the Indonesian presidency is next year, and then we can identify parts of this, like this, how this communique can carry over, like what key messages can carry over for next year, like what are the things that we really want to keep pushing on. Every year, it seems like we have the same message, but also very different. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Because the problems that we're facing, it's all the same, yet at the same time, we tailor our responses according to, like, in this
The
particular
situation.
snapshot of time.
That's right. And
Yeah,
our own
exactly.
backgrounds. And that's why next year we're bringing up a legacy issue, a new one, which is diversity and inclusion, which is something new. So hopefully it won't be as like all jam-packed into one. We've got 4 priority areas next year. For those of you who are interested, the delegation selection committee is putting up something special, and it's coming up soon for Indonesia anyway. And I want to thank Emiliano for staying all the way until the
yes.
end. You're a trooper. But thank you, Mexico. And hopefully, whenever you have the chance to come and visit, we're all here. And that's, I think that's a great way to end this, because it shows how, it's not just a platform for diplomacy, but it's a way for the youths to kind of not just understand each other or try to understand each other, but also to get this network that otherwise would be so difficult to get, in any other ways, and it's not just in the past, it might just be meeting during the summit, but we've had months, right? You guys had months to get to know each other and communicate and all that. I mean, different levels, but in that point, you're making friends for life. And I'm, and I'm so happy for all of you for having had a successful, congratulations for all of you for having had a successful Y20 summit, and whatever level of capacity, but at least it was done, and now it's the hard work, right? I mean, before it was hard, but now it's going to be harder. It's about advocating for implementation, and I wish you all the best. And again, all of you are welcome to join us in next year's Y20 summit. We have everything live streamed and shared with all of you, from the kickoff in February to all the pre-summits that are going to be happening, all 4 of them, every single month we will have, and it'll all end in July next year in 2 different cities, in Jakarta and Bandung of Indonesia, in the 4th largest population of the world, which a lot of people forget or don't know about. So thank you so much, Emiliano, again, Puteri, Angelo, Dea, you guys are amazing. Thank you for sharing, for spilling the tea, for having this reunion, and we all appreciate you. Have a great day, Emiliano, and have a good night, Puteri, Angelo, and Dea. And for all of you tuning in, wherever you are, we love
Thank you
you.
very much. Muchas
Take
Thank you,
care.
gracias.
Sarah.
Keep
Thank you so much,
healthy.
Masara, for making this so fun.
Hey, 2 hours, you don't get it. You went
And
by.
thanks,
so quickly.
Emiliano. I'm
Thank
so
you.
Thanks,
glad the
Emiliano,
rest
for
of
staying.
you and like the viewers get to experience like the you from the summit. Like, you're such a gem. Thank you.
Yes.
No, thank you so much for inviting.
Thank you so much, Emiliano. Okay, great time, everyone, and we'll end it right there. Here from me, Sarah Rahayu Saraswati from the Indonesian Youth Diplomacy. See you again next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.